why you would choose to go with a broker over just going with your bank.
A broker is a motor show. A broker has access to all of the different manufacturers out there so that you can actually compete and compare. When I'm a second opinion broker, these are the two things. I want to borrow more than I've been pre-approved for, but is there a better rate out there? You get all of that when you see a broker and you don't get it when you see a bank. You might have a direct relationship with a bank. You might come and see your broker and the broker might say, you know what? I've compared your option with that bank to all the other banks out there, and you know what you've got is really good for you. And it's all about clients feeling comfortable, supported, like we're all there for the journey.
Yep.
I think banks aren't really nailing that at the moment.
So, Joey Iezzi, welcome back to the Hot Property Podcast.
Thanks,
You're our
Jacob.
first return guest, actually.
How good. You've run out of content already.
No. We've still got plenty of important guests. But you are our favourite guest.
Oh, thank you.
So, mate, like, since we've spoken last, the business has grown. You've got additional team on board. You're kicking goals. And today we just wanted to sit down and do a quick podcast episode.
Yeah, cool.
You know, I was always told a quick game's a good game. So we'll jump into, and we just really want to go deep on one particular topic, which is all about why you would choose to go with a broker over just going with your bank, who you do your everyday banking with, your transactional account, and the benefit and the insight and the value that a broker can drive towards a transaction, whether it's buying residential, commercial, or refinancing.
Cool. Okay, let's get into it. So there's a number of things that I can dribble about, and even though you said this will be short, watch it not be short. But do you remember motor shows? We're both car enthusiasts, right? Do you remember the Brisbane motor shows?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the convention centre. They were good fun, and all the manufacturers would bring out all their cars. And in fact, there's talk about this new motor centre being built near the Brisbane airport.
Yes.
Mark Scaife was designing the track. I'm not sure if that's happening still.
Yep.
Okay, why do I say that? Because think about going into Toyota.
Yes.
Okay. You want the best car for you, whatever it might be, the best four-wheel drive with all the bells and whistles, good fuel economy, etc. And you go to Toyota and you get something, right? You get a Prado or Land Cruiser and you're happy with it, but you don't know what else is out there. I liken that to seeing a broker first walking directly into a bank.
Yeah.
It's the same, right? So a broker is a motor show. A broker has access to all of the different manufacturers out there so that you can actually compete and compare, right? I mean, competition is what drives, I suppose, from a consumer's point of view, prices down.
Absolutely.
And choice.
Yep.
So that's the main difference. That's the analogy I would use. I'm not sure if I said it very
that's a great
clearly,
analogy,
but you know, a broker is a motor show versus a bank. And I guess the reason I say that is because it doesn't necessarily mean that the person who walked away with the Toyota Land Cruiser didn't get the best car for them. That can still happen, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing to suggest that that same consumer couldn't walk into a motor show and still end up with the Toyota Land Cruiser, but at least they got to compare it with the BMW X5 and the Audi Q5 or whatever it might be, and made an informed decision comparing all the options.
Yeah.
So there are times when you might have a direct relationship with a bank. You might come and see your broker, and the broker might say, you know what? I've compared your option with that bank to all the other banks out there, and you know what you've got is really good for you.
Yeah.
And a good broker would say that. However, 9 times out of 10, there are other things to consider.
Yeah.
And so that's the main reason why it makes sense to see a broker over a bank.
Yeah, and I guess that you've led straight into my next question, which was, if I'm a CBA customer, why shouldn't I just go to CBA, even though you've written a CBA loan for us or looked after us with CBA?
Yep.
And I guess once you're a customer of a bank, they send you marketing material. There's always pop-ups when you're in your internet banking, that sort of thing, to say, hey, we can look after this as well.
Yeah.
So why should people be wary of that?
Yeah, it's a bit of an awkward conflict. It's called channel conflict, actually.
Okay.
So most banks have 2 channels: direct, which is first party, and third party, which is broker channel.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I'm going to get this wrong, but around 70 to 80% of all lending in Australia now originates through broker channel, through third party. So mortgage brokers are hugely responsible for the volume of lending that's going through the Australian banking system, which is really good, and probably speaks to those points I made earlier.
Yeah.
Someone called me yesterday, a prospect. I hadn't spoken to her before. She said, I've got a home loan. It's on a fixed rate. This is a real story. So I'm on a fixed rate. It's coming off fixed in, I think it was June.
Yeah.
And I just want to know what I need to do to prepare. And I said, okay, have you been speaking to the bank directly? She said, yes. And I said, was the loan originated through the bank? She said, no, I went through a broker. And that was an interesting conversation because she asked me, she basically asked me what you've asked me. She said, well, who's who in the zoo? Like,
Yes.
am I speaking to the broker now? Am I speaking to the banker? She was aware that the broker was getting trail commission and she kind of made the point. And my response to her was simple. Firstly, I defended the broker because coming into your reversion rate in 3 months' time, that broker probably has, a good broker should have in their CRM and in their system a notification to reach out and prepare for when your fixed rate comes off and you go to reversion. But maybe they don't have that planned until 2 months before. So I gave that broker the benefit of the doubt and I did say, let's just wait and see. Yeah. She has booked me in for a meeting this afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry, other broker.
Yeah, exactly. But her other questions were about well, what value is the broker adding if I can just speak directly to the bank? And I think this is genuinely, as a mortgage broker, this is an awkward thing. The way I see it is like this. A broker is fundamental in structuring and preparing debt to originate the loan. It doesn't mean that they don't serve the client after settlement, and that's Delta's slogan, like service beyond settlement. But I do think there are times when simply because of the access that brokers get or lack thereof, there are times when a client still should or would be better off contacting the bank directly. Yeah. Simple example, discharge authorities. Brokers don't get access to discharge authorities. What is a discharge authority? If you're refinancing from Westpac to CBA, just two random banks that I've chosen here, in order for Westpac to say goodbye to your mortgage and let CBA take the mortgage in a refinance scenario, you have to complete what's called a discharge authority, which notifies that bank that you're leaving. Yes. Brokers aren't given the ability to do that on behalf of a client.
Interesting.
So there's an example where, you have a broker, but the client still needs to speak directly to the bank. Product features, issues with apps, statements not being right. There are many administrative things that honestly make sense. Like a lot of the big banks have really good client centers and help desks where it does make sense that the client speaks directly to the bank. It's not really a broker's responsibility to be responsible. It's not their responsibility to manage those administrative or clerical kind of.
That's right, and you don't have access to the coding of the Macquarie app.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, but when it comes to the next steps or changes to products or changes to features or changes to loan structures or anything like that, I do believe a broker should be proactive in their approach. They should have the right systems in place to be reaching out to their client. The client was also asking me. This particular person was asking me questions around rates coming down and at what point they should be considering other options out there. And I kind of explained to her that for us, when the RBA dropped their rates, we emailed every client advising them that had happened. Yes. We then followed up with each particular client around when their lender would pass on the rate reduction. Yes. And keep them informed. So certainly brokers do need to be proactive and keep their finger on the pulse with their clients. But inherently there are times when it makes more sense to just speak directly to the bank, not the broker. It doesn't mean you have a bad broker. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've had a case recently with a property that we were helping the owners sell and the buyers buy, and they received a rejection under the finance condition for their contract that they were under contract for. They were able to seek an extension. We were able to, do you need a second opinion? They hadn't come to you first, otherwise this wouldn't have happened. But let's see. Fingers crossed. But we were able to refer them to you. You were able to have a look at their situation and be like, well, the bank, dealing with the bank directly, hasn't taken into account these couple of things that you can get a bit creative with. And because you're an active business owner and you've got active team members within your team who are not just, dare I say, bank employees who are just doing their job and they don't really, well, maybe they get paid off the result or not, but like in business, you get paid when you generate a result. Yeah. And the bank employees that these people were dealing with didn't really care about the outcome and didn't care that these people weren't going to get their family home. But you can step in. Yeah, I think, look, I wouldn't say they don't care. I'll play devil's advocate here. Yeah. Their hands are tied to the policies and the credit appetite of that bank. Right. So when I talked about Toyota Land Cruiser versus going to the motor show, what I didn't talk about is the tangible reasons as to why I think a broker makes sense. Now, there's two main reasons, okay? Reason number one, person has been pre-approved by ABC Bank for $600,000. They would like to borrow more. ABC Bank has said that is the most you can borrow. That's like the Toyota Land Cruiser having a top speed of 200 k's per hour, but you want something that can do 250 k's per hour. Well, go to the motor show and find a car or a vehicle that does that. Yes. So in terms of broker involvement and where we add value, number one is, are you trying to borrow more? Are you trying to increase your budget? I'd love to show you a tool that we use, which is very popular and all the brokers use it. It's called Quickli.
Yeah.
What happens is we put information into it about a household, the income, the expenses, and the profile of the household, and then it tells us how much that individual can borrow across 40 lenders.
Right. Okay. Wow.
Now, what's really interesting is for the relatively straightforward loans, both PAYG, no debt, no HEX, apart from what the applicants are looking to buy or borrow, I should say, you might have a variance of 5% between the major lenders, 5 to 10%. But as you get more niche, so self-employed, maybe not, maybe self-employed income is volatile, or the more recent year was much better.
Yes.
Certain types of expenses within the self-employed business, such as liabilities. As you start to get more niche, that range exacerbates. So you have like one bank that can lend you 1.8 mil, and one bank that can lend you 800,000.
Yeah, wow.
It's crazy. So that's the tool, that's the information that a broker provides, number one.
Yes.
Second reason, rate. So you're happy with the amount you've got. So these are when I'm a second opinion broker, these are the two things. Every single time, it's one of the two. I want to borrow more than I've been pre-approved for, or I'm happy with what I've been pre-approved for, but is there a better rate out there?
Yeah.
And that's, again, we have access to a panel of lenders, and we can compare the rates very quickly and provide that information back.
Absolutely.
So you get all of that when you see a broker, and you don't get it when you see a bank. And again, I'm not suggesting that there aren't scenarios where if you look back, you go, actually, that client, what they got with the bank and what they got with me is fine. And there are times when I've had clients come to me who are pre-approved directly with a bank, and I say, look, for the 2 basis point savings, you can come with me definitely, but you're going to have to go through the loan application process again. How about we just keep talking and you let me know if you need me? So I think there are certainly pros and cons. Going back to, but I don't think it's because the bankers don't care. I think it's because they have their own policies. That's the reason I explained it, the range there. The reason that range exists is because of the credit appetite of the different lenders. And if that lender does not lend to self-employed individuals, and one of the 2 applicants is self-employed, and they're earning net profit 100K for the year, that's 100K of income in the household that bank cannot recognize and therefore cannot lend with, lend for. That's not the bank's employees being lazy. It's actually them just, their hands are tied.
It's just their policy.
Correct.
Yeah. And I guess for those people who might hear that or be dealing with their bank, they hear that and then they get disheartened to go, well, I can't borrow for, X amount of years because I've just gone out on my own self-employed, or, I've only been self-employed for 2 years, but the bank requires 3 years of income and tax returns, that sort of stuff. What would your message be to someone like that who feels like they might have been pigeonholed by policy in the past?
Yeah. Firstly, definitely have a chat to a broker. You could still be pigeonholed, but there's a good chance there's a solution out there, especially in like the low doc lending space. So banks who aren't looking for 2 years self-employment history, and are willing to lend off, 2 BASs, for example.
Right.
Normally, I think it's 12 months trading though, so just disclaimer
caveat
on this one. But like, there are different options. You pay for that. You get there's a higher rate attached to it, right? I had a self-employed individual who financially was in an excellent position, probably one of my strongest clients, but hadn't done his tax for 2020. Hadn't done tax in time for the particular period that we're needing it to be done for in order to obtain finance. So we did a low doc application for him, 2 BASs, and he could borrow whatever he wanted, basically.
Fantastic.
So that was suitable for him, and it was a 1% rate premium, but he was happy to do that while he sorted out his tax and got to buy the property he wanted then and there. So my advice to people who are worried about being pigeonholed is there's no guarantee that you're not, but I think have a chat to a broker, again, because of the options that we have, and see if we can explore something. And a good broker, at the very least, will help you with the blueprint or the roadmap to get to where you need to. So, okay, look, this is the situation at the moment, but here's some things to consider and some steps that you can take so that you can either get into the property that you want at a point in time or whatever it might be. So I think that's probably my advice on that.
Yeah. And I think yourself and your team are so good at that goal setting piece, and that, okay, here's where you're at, here's where we ideally want to be, and here's the journey between. Whereas some, I don't know, I'm not speaking, on behalf of and being a negative on banks, but they might assess it and go, no can do, come back in 6 or 12 months with no creative criticism.
Kind of binary, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's yes or no. And that pathway piece is so important for people to make the next steps and do that.
So that's probably a really good segue into the final reason I think you should choose a broker over a bank. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
We talked about options and competition.
Yes.
We've talked about, like rates or borrowing power, and that kind of feeds into that point.
Yep.
But the huge one is education, relationship, service.
Yep.
Banks are protecting their bottom line, and margins are really, if you speak to any banker at the moment in Australia, like margins are thin.
They're tight. Yeah.
Automation's taking over. You see a suite of redundancies across the banking sector over the last 12 months. And in replacement of that, all banks are talking about is AI and tech and systems and automation.
You're right, yeah.
And with that comes efficiency and comes, certainly a better and healthier bottom line. What you lose is the client experience and the interaction, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I often get asked whether AI is going to replace mortgage brokers. And when I started Delta Wealth, slogan, for lack of a better word, of service beyond settlement, I talked about the accounting sector, because the accounting sector 10, 15 years ago was really shaken up by Xero, because the glorified bookkeepers who were also accountants kind of lost their ability to provide value to clients, the perceived value.
Yes.
Because clients are like, man, we can just use this software in-house. We don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
But the accountants that survived changed their names to business advisors.
That's right.
And the reason they survived is because of the relationship and the advice they provided.
Yes.
I think broking is very similar. Yes, compare the meerkat.com. Yes, there's going to be systems and websites coming to the public very soon, if not already, that I don't know of, where you can put in your, basically like Quickli, like what I explained, right? There is a tool out there. I don't see why something like Quickli couldn't be replicated for the general public, where you put in, just like when you're trying to get your insurance quote, you put in information about yourself and it spits out comparisons.
Yep.
And that would be very threatening to brokers if brokers weren't providing peripheral comfort, education, support, talking through the process, hooking up clients with conveyances and giving advice around the journey. And there is so much. That's 95% of it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Most brokers have access to the same tools. Yes, of course, there's a craft to it.
Yes.
I'm really passionate about that. And thankfully, so are the other brokers in our business, Jack and Jason. They've got a real, very, very different personalities to myself, very different way of going about things, but they have a craft.
Yes.
Which is they're very passionate about, and which is really cool to watch when they're having client interviews. But that's where the value is. That's where I think brokers really are adding value and changing the industry because of that.
Yeah.
And you've made the point exactly. Even if you happen to see a really good bank teller who was providing information, at the end of the day, they're clocking off at 5 when they're gone.
Yeah.
We are answering phones on weekends when clients are going through open homes. We are available out, beyond 9 to 5.
Yep.
So there's that accessibility. But really importantly, if you look at, Delta's Google reviews, which I've been doing recently because it makes me really happy.
Yeah.
I don't just sit there at night reading Google reviews, but I just had a look at them recently, and there's a theme coming out, and it's all about clients feeling comfortable, supported, like we were all there for the journey.
Yeah.
They're not saying Delta Wealth got the best rate. They're not saying Delta Wealth maximized my borrowing capacity.
Yeah.
They're actually saying we just felt really comfortable and supported and nurtured throughout our journey.
That's right.
And we want Joe, or we want Jack, or we want Jason with us forever.
Yeah, that's right.
That's really cool. And, people always say your consumers remember not what you did, but how you made them feel.
Absolutely.
And I think banks aren't really nailing that at the moment.
100%. And it is that care piece to take you from this point to that point. In our office, Aaron he got a new listing off the back of a client who tried to do the sellmyplace.com.au and tried to do it themselves and save themselves a substantial chunk of money.
Good comparison.
And that's fair. But at the end of the day, they said, look, we really struggled with, we had offers, but we just really struggled to get them to the next step or to negotiate. And that's what's a good real estate agents hone in their craft.
Yeah.
That's what they're really good at. And they're good at extracting that extra little bit for their sellers because they know that's where they pay for themselves. They know that's where they can get the extra 10, 20, 30, even more, $1,000 on the bottom line. And that's what keeps us in business.
Exactly.
The same as what keeps you in business.
It's a good analogy or a good comparison. I think that's spot on.
Yep.
There is always a transaction. We're in transactional industries. But the difference between a good real estate agent or a good real estate sales service and a bad one is the feeling that the client walks away with.
Oh, that's right.
To be honest, and I think it's the exact same in broking.
Yep, 100%. Mate, appreciate your time. We did say it was going to be a short one. but hopefully, the audience got some value out of that, and hopefully they've learned a thing or two about the difference between banks and brokers, because I think there's a massive opportunity there for yourself to go in there and really make a difference in people's lives, and appreciate everything you do for us, for our clients.
Thank you. Likewise. It's been good,
keep
mate.
it up.
No, appreciate it. You can title this one Mortgage Broking equals Motor Show.
Lovely. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thanks
Thanks
mate.
Jacob.